This is part two of our effort to answer the question, what am I to think of transgender people and transgenderism? Let's continue from where we were in my last video. We had just completed reviewing what science tells us about chromosomes and biological or genetic gender identity. We know that in humans, chromosomal patterns are established at the time of egg fertilization, and nothing subsequently can change the underlying pattern, whether it's XX, XY, or an uncommon variation. Continuing, those chromosomal patterns are likely not the end of the story regarding gender identity. Now, this seems to fly in the face of what many politicians are saying and what we may think intuitively, but today we know from science with some certainty that while human gender determination is primarily governed by the chromosomal patterns set at fertilization, the downstream presence and regulation by other key genes, the hormonal environment during early development, and other environmental factors may also have an impact. Beyond chromosomes and chromosomal patterns, beyond other key genes, beyond hormonal environments, and beyond other environmental factors, hey, I know people experience dysphoria. People likely have from the beginning of time. So I have to understand dysphoria as best I can to have this conversation. Literature tells me that dysphoria is not so much a diagnosis as the description of a mood that can accompany life and mental health conditions persistently. That word persistently is an important word. When people experience dysphoria, they feel restless, irritable, disconnected, and unable to find satisfaction in life. Honestly, while I have felt some of those moods at points in my life, I have never felt them persistently. All in the words in this description have specific meanings that I only understand as a layman. I try to understand them with some cognitive empathy, but it takes professional understanding to grasp their meaning fully. As I have studied this topic, I have only found a few what I believe are truths regarding transgenderism. Some of these truths are objective, truthful from every angle, and unchanging with situation or environment. Some of them are more subjective or relative truths, true relative to situations or environments. And some are honestly more hypotheses than truths, using the scientific vernacular. Hypotheses are those things that available data points you toward, but the data is incomplete. Now, first, there is no chromosome or genetic marker or hormonal signature or environmental pattern measurable that flags with certainty who or who is not transgender. This is objectively true. Second, there are genetic variations that appear to influence how individuals respond to hormones, like estrogen, which could influence the development of masculine and feminine traits. This may or may not be related. What I mean is, the relationship would not warrant labeling someone one way or the other simply because of the presence or absence of this variation. This appears to be a hypothesis and requires more study. Third, recently, neuroimaging has shown some structural differences in areas of the brain that may be associated with the influence of hormones. This may or may not be related. This appears a hypothesis and requires more study. Fourth, family and community acceptance of an individual who decides they are transgender helps those people feel better about themselves, helps their dysphoria. To me, this is reasonable. It seems subjectively true. However, for me, a question remains whether acceptance is really best for either the community or the individual. I believe more study and consideration is required to determine more than correlation to answer this question. Fifth, the apparent increase in numbers of people feeling they are transgender appears associated with the previously mentioned increased social acceptance. The awareness and support many medical professionals and communities are providing to people who declare their transgenderism. Now, I think this is subjectively true, like how the social acceptance of tattoos has made them almost mandatory for many, if not most, younger people. Sixth, efforts to try and convince a person that they should embrace their biologically or genetically assigned gender as their gender identity after they have concluded there is a mismatch are probably unproductive and may be harmful. This appears objectively true when I compare it with the results of efforts in other similar areas. Simply telling someone they are wrong has a low track record of success. Now, finally, personalized dialogue and further research are important to ensure care remains patient-centered and responsive to individual and community needs, and does not become simply a way for professionals or patients to be right. And this is always objectively true. So, conceptually, quoting from a recent New York Times article on a different topic, I believe it is important to always remember that, quote, any correlation between a complex trait like intelligence and gender identity, let alone social constructs like race and gender identity, is not the same as causation, end quote. There are simply too many unknowns. Now, that is what I know from science. You have probably noted my use of the phrase good of the community several times. Now, this is my addition to much of the information I have found. I think, as we have seen in many other areas of health and medicine, that community benefit must always be a factor considered. Let's take a break there and pick up in our next video. Aloha.